Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for the 3rd of November 2022. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. Mark, great to see you. I know you've been under the weather for the last couple of days, but it looks like you're making a very speedy recovery.
Yeah. I kind of got flu. It sort of hit me like a train, and in the middle of the day, even though I'd actually been sort of working, taking calls and stuff, and then just felt, well, I can't go on, so I just went to bed. And I think it's one of those things where 12 hours sleep just can do you the world of good.
It's amazing what happens when you just let your body rest. And I think we're especially in this industry, in a very hyperactive 24-hour work cycle. And good on you for just putting the time aside and letting yourself get better.
No, that's absolutely good. And it sort of connects into what we're talking about this week, which is really around the flexibility of work and being able to change your hours. Because I saw recently Jonas Berggren, who's the head of business development for North Europe at Transcom. He wrote quite a long article that was really focused on how the gig economy is changing the future of CX, but it wasn't really dedicated only to like GigCX as we've talked about it a few times here. I think he was really talking about work has changed. Expectations of agents has completely changed. They don't want to be working 45 hours a week in a contact center anymore. They want to have flexibility over their hours. And he's really kind of arguing that this is good for the employers and good for the employees as well.
Well, I think that there's a lot of very interesting points that were made in this article, and there's no question about it. This idea about working flexibility is a topic that we've seen come up on the pod several times in the last year, and I anticipate going into 2023, it's going to keep appearing. There seems to be a bit of I don't want to say a disconnect, but maybe perhaps a cleavage between what the outsourcers and the enterprise captive centers are looking for versus what the agents are looking to do when it comes to being frontline professionals. And reconciling this gap, I think, is going to be a major challenge. Look, the reality is that in order to deliver the best results, organizations are going to need the best people on the front lines. To get the best people on the front lines, there's going to need to be at least some degree of flexibility in the work model. And this is where I think that the article that we're looking into and the pod that we're looking into this week really touches on a lot of very important points.
Yeah, and I think that if you talk to people, across the industry, from the more traditional physical contact center type operation right through to the completely platform-based GigCX, it seems that there is a change around the expectations of flexibility in working hours. But that's even like not just like changing day by day, but even like how many hours do you want to work each week? It seems that there really is a push from a lot of people who say 20 hours a week is enough for me. That's enough cash for me, and I'd rather have the flexibility around the rest of my life.
And again, this is, I think, something that's going to need to be taken into account by the employers. Now, one of the things that I think that the employers are also going to need to do, as well as recognizing that perhaps the same desire to work the typical 40-hour, 45-hour week that we would have seen traditionally might not necessarily be as pervasive as before. They're going to need to adjust their profiles. They're going to need to adjust their processes in order to make sure that a labor force that perhaps might include more people, but working shorter shifts or lower numbers of days is going to be the norm moving forward. And also, Mark, I think also keeping in mind that the potential for this to be very much focused, at least initially, on a few more dynamic, forward-looking industries is going to be the norm as this trend perhaps goes further across different, more traditional verticals that have been using CX as a platform for supporting end users.
Yeah, and there's quite a few changes as well. It's not just around working hours, but the fact that there is a focus on using virtual platforms, being able to work from home. You start seeing things like increased diversity in the workforce, opportunities for retired people to enter the workforce again. And just the fact that the companies can hire from anywhere means that they've actually got a much bigger and better choice of people to get onto the team.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to this podcast interview, and as we move towards the interview, Mark, I would just counsel everybody who's got this interest in the flexible working model to listen closely, because there's a lot of good lessons that are going to come out of the discussion that you had.
Okay, let's go straight to the interview with Jonas Berggren from Transcom. Jonas, hi, it's great to get you on the podcast. Now, I saw a recent article you posted on LinkedIn, and it was quite detailed, maybe a couple of thousand words, but it was talking, well, let's go through the title first. It was How the Gig Economy is Reshaping the Future of CX. And you talked a bit about the gig economy and how it's much more than just what we see day to day, the food delivery, the Uber and taxis. Do you think that this kind of flexible working is now becoming essential for the CX environment?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think so, and from multiple angles. But first and foremost, thanks, Mark, for having me. And to elaborate a little bit on your question, obviously it's no news. We have a much more demanding customer base out there. And they have put a lot higher expectations on the brands and where we actually are representing the brands in the services that we deliver. So I think from that perspective, for sure, it's a must. But there's also other angles, like the war for talent that we've also been speaking about, and we have the Gen Z people entering the labor market now to a higher degree. So there's some takeaways from that angle as well on flexibility. And then I think we might talk about this maybe further on, but we all know, everybody's expecting a downturn in the economy globally around the corner, at least for a while. So with that increased volatility and to some extent unpredictability, I think the flexibility serves a purpose there as well. So there's multiple angles that you can discuss this from.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you quoted some research in the article that said most gig CX agents are happy in their job. I think it was really high. It was something like 96% say that they're satisfied. And is this because the agents or the employees, they've now got an expectation of flexibility. And so if an employer gives them that flexibility, they're going to be quite happy and engaged. But if they have a very rigid employer, will a rigid employer struggle to attract and retain people? The war for talent, as you said.
I think they will struggle. And I'll give you my thoughts about this, but I think I read some great stuff from Cognizant also on the future of work. They had done some research, and they kind of pointed out, and I'm coming back to the younger people now sort of becoming a larger portion of the total labor market. The key theme amongst a lot of younger workers is that there's a relation between purpose and work. And it's a little bit two-folded. So I'll take them one by one, but the bigger picture, no surprise, around environment, society, diversity, all of those things, and here I think it's not the reason why they're happier, because here there's more skepticism because there's a gap between what employers say versus what they do, But on an individual basis, that's where I think we find more of the answer, because as I said, that relationship between purpose and work, people want to fulfill their personal objectives. They like being passionate about what they do, and they bring that to the office nowadays. They don't do it on their free time only. So, and then there's also another element where younger people now are very cautious and very conscious about creating a healthy work-life balance. So I think, around those themes, this employer that doesn't embrace the flexibility and adaptability will struggle, to attract the best talent. But then there's also, where you need flexibility for the pure purpose. There are parts of the world where you need to be able to work 1, 2, or 3 jobs and fit that into a day/night shift, because you need the money. So there are different, but if you take it on a more higher level, moving up the Maslow's stairway, I think fulfilling your purpose at work has become more important for younger generations.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I guess there's been a move towards like environment, social, and governance. That conversation around what are companies doing, and how are they affecting the environment, how are they affecting the society around them. And I think that, if we go back to before the big financial crash of 2007-8, then people felt a lot of this was just marketing. It was companies that wanted to look good. But perhaps in the last decade or so, it has really become more important. If you ask Gen Z especially, why did you choose one employer over another? Then it can actually be.
Yeah, and they went through school with Google and other sort of very important tools at their side from the very beginning. So they're very source critical and they check things up. So you cannot get away with saying something and doing something else. They will spot that and they will see through that. So you need to be very transparent on what you're doing. But I think on that angle, that's not what's causing the happiness. It's more when you become more autonomous and you have more freedom to set this up so it suits your individual objectives. That's where I think is the strong link to the satisfaction.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because often when we read about younger employees, we talk about millennials, but the reality is that millennials are now often in their 40s or late 30s. And, but if you compare that to Gen Z that has had internet access throughout all of their school years, there's a completely different view on information and access to information. Yeah. Well, you quoted Barry Matthews, which was great because he was a recent guest on CX Files.
Yeah, no, I think he had a very valuable point.
Yeah, and he talked about flexibility, allowing companies to hire from anywhere. So, a company like your own, you no longer need to only hire people that live near to a contact center or near to an office. So you can draw on a much bigger pool of talent. But does that also create other opportunities as well?
For sure. And I think, this sort of decoupling the geography is a known fact, and it's tried and tested to some extent as well now, not to say the least for the last couple of years. But another obvious thing is, of course, that you're able to seek out the expertise where it exists. But also other things like, I'm thinking, I was speaking in Oslo at an event for, a few weeks back, and one of the themes were around, how do we make the rural areas prosperous in the future, so we don't have everybody leaving and moving into the big city. So I think that this also creates new alternatives for the urbanization trends from country to city. People can find work where they want to live, where they want to raise their family, or pursue their off-work interests. So I'm an outdoor freak. I might want to live near nature, but I still want an interesting work for an interesting brand, without moving. So that's another angle. I think there's a tweak on that. You move a bit out of the city to find a nice place to live, but you still work in the city. With these new type of jobs and the way we're working today, we can avoid a lot of the commuting and be more sustainable. So that's sort of a positive effect of everything. And depending on your skill set, all of a sudden with this decoupling geography a little bit, you can compete for jobs at your dream brand, without having to move. And you can be, you can become brand advocates and creating great loyalty for the customers of the brand, basically producing your service from anywhere. And then I think I have a last example that I spoke about in Norway as well, because I had a colleague representing a big disability association in Norway up on the stage next to me, and we were thinking and we were talking about this in the breakout, and think about all the people with disabilities. They already have an adapted home environment, and they can easily become a part of the work team with a minimum of hurdles. We don't have to rebuild the office for somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with a visual disability or hearing disability. they could work from their home environment where they're sort of safe and secure, and they can, in our type of business, work on different channels, voice if you have a visual disability, obviously, and on the written channels if you have the a hearing disability. So there's all those things that basically fantasy that's setting the border for you. So you hear me being very positive about this.
Exactly. I was just going to say, because you're talking about like it is almost like a fantasies come true, because what you're talking about is, if you can hire from anywhere, then you can revitalize rural communities. You can offer good skilled work to people who may have found it difficult to commute to an office in the past. And so there's all these kind of opportunities. But you mentioned
I sometimes say to the public sector, this unemployment agencies, now everything opened up. I mean, the trouble with matchmaking between demand and supply became a whole lot easier all of a sudden,
Yeah. You mentioned about expertise there as well. And I was thinking that is an interesting difference, because, I mean, if traditionally you had an office and you needed to hire 100 people to support a gaming company, you'd have to find 100 people with some sort of gaming knowledge within commuting distance of that office. But now what you're saying is basically you can just go anywhere and find fans of the particular game you're supporting then,
and we haven't spoken so much about that, but I mean, obviously it's the technology of today and the evolution of that makes this much more easy when everything is in the cloud, and that's the connection point, and that's where you have all the functionality and you can do all the cool stuff, and you can just sort of tap into it. But I mean, again, I think this is closely connected to the younger generation entering the labor market, as I said in the beginning. I mean, work itself is changing, and that's why the way we work is evolving. It's much more connected to what we want to achieve in life, rather than just a trade for a paycheck to pay rent and put food on the table. Not for everybody, but for somebody, and some people. And why should not passionate gamers serve the gaming community? Or I'll just pick a few examples here. I mean, if you go into the Spotify homepage, you see the rock stars. That's kind of a peer-to-peer support. It's actually customers helping customers, and they're called rock stars. And you can extend the list in eternity. I mean, why couldn't we have the fashionistas for the retail and apparel, the outdoor freaks for people like me, with an outdoor interest, film lovers, foodies? I mean, I could just go on. Why shouldn't we connect people to work with what they're passionate about if we can?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I fly a drone, it's made by DJI, and whenever I've needed technical support on that, I've noticed that it seems that they introduce me to another drone user. So I'm not talking I'm not talking to somebody who works for the company or works for a contact center. Yeah. It's as if they just matchmake two people who can help each other. Yeah. But you mentioned, right at the beginning there, that flexibility may be about more than just acknowledging that people want to work in a different way, but it could be a great way to also prepare your business if there is a downturn coming as well. So, I mean, are you seeing clients talking about this? I mean, are people saying we need to actually build a more flexible sort of labor force to respond to uncertainty?
I think so, and there's sort of always different stages of maturity, and some people still talk about the shoring, and that's still important, but shoring have steps. So are you onshore, are you going near shore, are you going offshore, or are you smart shoring, and you weave in sort of the work at home element into it, and all the hybrid mixes you can think about. But I think, I mean, if I put it in a more generic way, I see, because of this, I see, a model with a healthy mix around passion and discipline, and you pair that with some innovative tech and built-in flexibility. And I think that model will always prevail, not just for the bad times. It will be just as good when you have a little bit more room to invest, and when you can build a bit more, then you can improve the model, So that model, that recipe could work both business cycles up and down.
Yeah. So it can help you to be more flexible and to prepare for a downturn. But then when things start getting better, then it's also good to be more flexible.
Absolutely. Just going the other way, ramping up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've focused a lot then on the benefits for the employee, Gen Z and wanting to have more purpose and flexibility in their employment. But just to sort of round off the discussion then, I mean, what's in this for the employer? I mean, companies that are seeing all of their employees demanding flexible work, is it also good for you guys as well?
Maybe I'm too limited if this is an option or not, because I don't think it's an option. So the answer is no doubt. I think it's about adapting or becoming relevant, to be honest. Not like in 1 second, but over time. And we need a leadership makeover, because the organization is changing in terms of how the mix is. And I mean, I've grown up now, born back in the late 60s, and worked through a few decades now with all their particulars, and seeing this and working with a lot of young people, it had really it had taken a lot from me to adapt and follow the evolution and change everything from my leadership and my style of leading or managing, for that sake sometimes. But I think it's becoming more. We need to relearn how to be followers in being leaders, and we have to reverse mentoring. So instead of us mentoring the young, we need to listen to the young to understand. Have the ears to the ground and try to take in the meta trends and the changes that are going on, if we haven't already noticed it. And then obviously not swap everything that we've done that we feel is flying and is working, but mix it in a healthy way over time. So you get that sort of, ongoing development in the right direction. So yeah, we have to adapt, and it includes the leadership.
Yeah. I was just talking to a banker who was saying, coming from the position of a senior leader, and then hearing from team members who are much more junior, but are refusing to take a conference call at 7:00 in the evening, saying that's my family time. And it's like the senior management are now just having to sort of evolve and learn from the attitudes of the young.
Absolutely, and for me, I mean, I'm a super curious guy, and you can hear me being enthusiastic about this, because I think when you stop questioning and when you're not interested in learning new things, when you don't want to be a lifelong learner, you stop your own development, and that's your own decision. But I mean, I prefer to keep on developing rather than to stagnate, sort of. Well, I'm past middle age now, so I'm on the second half, but still, I think I have a few years in me. So
absolutely, and I think that's a great way to end the discussion. Basically, keep learning and keep adapting.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.